Native Americans in World War II in 1936, President Franklin D. Roosevelt said, "This generation has a rendezvous with destiny." When Roosevelt said that he probably had no idea how much World War II would make his prophecy true. A part of that generation were Native Americans who, when the war started, didn't think twice to enlist in the military for the defense of their country. No ethnic group that took part in the war had made a greater per capita contribution, and no ethnic group's status was changed more by the war. The pre-war era, although Native Americans were not drafted for World War I, because they were not considered citizens of the United States until 1924, approximately 10,000 Native American men volunteered for duty in World War I. Between the two World Wars, life on the reservations was difficult for Native Americans due to low levels of development and lack of economic opportunities. In 1939, the median income for Native American males living on reservations was $500, compared to the national average of $2,300. Nearly 1/4 of Native Americans had no formal education, and even for high school graduates, few forms of conventional employment existed on reservations. In the absence of conventional employment, those Native Americans who stayed on the reservations generally worked the land and farmed. America enters the war, and Native nations follow back in 1917. The Iroquois Confederacy had declared war on Germany. At the start of World War II, they still had not made peace, and when the war started, they were more than ready to fight. Other tribes were also eager as well. Some were willing to wait for hours in bad weather in order to sign their draft cards, often showing up with their own rifles. After the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, many Native Americans either enlisted in the armed forces or went to work in the war plants. According to one survey, by 1942, 40% of Native Americans enlisted voluntarily than had been drafted. Many women also contributed, serving in the Women's Army Corps, the women accepted for volunteer emergency service, and the Army Nurse Corps. On the day Pearl Harbor was attacked, approximately 5,000 natives were in service. That number escalated to over 44,000 by the time the war ended. This accounted for more than 10% of the native population during wartime. Because the Choctaw code talkers had confused the Germans in World War I, the German government feared the same thing would happen again in this war. During the 1930s, Nazi agents disguised as anthropologists and writers went to native reservations and tried to learn some of the native languages. The German government also tried to befriend some native tribes, linking the swastika to a similar native symbol. The Third Reich propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, went as far as calling the Lakota Sioux Aryans. The Nazi attempt to convert natives to their cause not only failed, but, feeling manipulated, it may be one of the reasons why so many native people joined the fight against the Axis power. They called Hitler "he who smells his own mustache," and Mussolini "gourd chin." Native American people saw Axis forces as a threat to their liberty. The Chippewa and Lakota Sioux joined the Iroquois and declared war on the Axis. Illiterate Native Americans learned to read, and those who didn't speak English learned the language so they could join the military. They organized remedial English training courses on the reservation. The war created a situation where both natives, whites, and other Americans had to operate together to defend their country. This led to weakening racial barriers in the armed forces and changed the perspective of American society. It also contributed to the post-war civil rights movement. The purchase of treasury stamps and war bonds by Native people reached $50 million by 1944. Many resources from Native reservations were used by the military industry, such as oil, gas, lead, zinc, copper, minerals, and coal. Interestingly enough, the Manhattan Project used helium from the Navajo reservation to make the atomic bombs. The Unbreakable Code The Army once again recruited Native Americans as code talkers, due to their specific languages. The tribes involved were Acoma, Apache, Assiniboine, Cree Cherokee, Chippewa, Choctaw, Comanche, Crow, Hopi, Ho-Chunk, Kiowa, Laguna, Menominee, Meskwaki, Mohawk, Muskogee, Creek, Navajo, Oneida, Pawnee, Pima, Ponca, Seminole, Sioux, Lakota, and Dakota, and Tlingit. The Army and Marine Corps sent a group of 24 Navajo code talkers into the Pacific Theater, who fought in many bloody island campaigns. In North Africa, 8 soldiers from the Meskwaki tribe served as code talkers in the 168th Infantry Regiment, 34th Division. In Europe, the 4th Signal Company, 4th Infantry Division, was assigned 17 Comanche code talkers. From the D-Day landings at Normandy in June 1944 to the liberation of Paris and the Battle of the Bulge, they kept the lines of communication secure. The Japanese and Germans never broke the communications. Native Americans in the war, at basic training, Native Americans were proficient in marksmanship and bayonet fighting, and were capable of enduring thirst and food deprivation better than the average soldier. The Native American soldier had an acute sense of perception, excellent endurance, and exceptional physical coordination. Other soldiers respected Native American soldiers because of their warrior reputation. In action, Native soldiers carried feathers, medicine bundles, sweetgrass cedar, and other sacred objects as their own protective medicine. Medicines they carried were purified through the tribal rituals of purification. Many Native soldiers counted coup each time they killed enemy soldiers. As their ancestors inscribed a line on their coup sticks, modern Native soldiers did so on their rifles and bayonets. Native American soldiers first saw action in the Pacific Theater. 300 of them, including a descendant of the famous Apache chief Geronimo, took part in the defense of Baton and Corregidor in 1942. Over 2,000 soldiers from Oklahoma and New Mexico served in the 45th Infantry Division, which fought in Italy and Central Europe. Natives also served in the 4th and 88th Division, the 19th and the 180th Infantry Regiments, the 147th Artillery Regiment, as well as the Oklahoma National Guard Unit. Basically, Native American soldiers fought through the entire war, from the attack on Pearl Harbor to the surrender of Japan in 1945. The Navajo and Hopi were assigned to service in the Pacific. The Comanches fought the Germans in Europe, and the Meskwakis fought them in North Africa. Soldiers from other tribes fought at various locations in Europe, the Pacific, North Africa, and elsewhere. For this service, they earned at least 71 air medals, 34 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 51 Silver Stars, 47 Bronze Stars, and 5 Medals of Honor. Life after the war for Native Americans. World War II meant a major break from the past. Many of them made a decent living for the first time in their lives, as the Native annual income after the war was raised to $2,500. The wartime and after-war industry provided jobs, so some Natives moved to major cities, and some stayed back on the reservations. The positive aspects were job opportunities, education, health care, and overall a higher living standard. The negative aspects of the post-war era were lessening of tribal influence and the threat of forfeiting the security of the reservations. In conclusion, Native American people learned they can live in both worlds. Thank you for watching. If you'd like the content, please consider sharing the video and supporting the channel on Patreon. We also launched our merch, so make sure to check it out. The link is in the description.